Hi guys, welcome back to the next part of our series. Today we're going to continue with Chapter 5, and Chapter 5 is one of the ones that I've been waiting to share with you because I'm going to show you several different ways in which you can present your characters. I know a lot of you guys watching this series are character artists or would like to present their props or characters in a better light, right? Literally. So this character right here is a character I did a couple of years ago, and I had a friend of mine, his name is Jose Canales. He helped me with the clothing system. He did a clothing system using Marvelous, and the lightsaber, of course. So it's supposed to be like a Jedi Knight creature. I throw in a very quick rig. It's actually very dirty. Like, we can't really move him that much, but you guys are free to like tweak it if you want to. We're just gonna give it a very basic pose, and we're gonna be talking about the basics of the rendering process for characters. What are the kind of things that we wanna emphasize and make sure people know this about their characters. So the first thing, I actually want to go over how this whole thing is set up, because there is a couple of like interesting things going on here. If at any point during the project you can't find the textures, like you try to render and everything renders without textures, make sure to go here to Windows, General Editors, and File Path Editor, and just repath whatever is not there. Most of the textures that I'm using should be on source images, but in the next chapter, in the final chapter, some of the textures are actually not in source images, so you might need to repath them. Just select, look for them, repath, and that's it, because everything should be connected to the materials and you should be able to access everything. Now for this guy right here, he's actually using UDEMs, so his textures are quite a bit heavy. I want to give you guys the best possible result, the best possible quality, so he's using, I believe, like 4 or 5, 3, it's 3 4K textures, okay, for each map, so quite heavy, quite heavy. Again, everything should be set up, everything should be set up properly, so if you hit render, we should get, well, we should see something. Now, when we're presenting characters, one of the most like basic ways to present a character is through something called a clay render. I actually always recommend my students to do clay renders if their characters have no textures, but this character actually does have textures, so we should be able to do a very nice clay render. So a clay render is nothing more than a very simple setup that we can use to present our characters, as you can see right here, in a very nice way. And as you can see, something that's very common in clay renders is this background right here. This is called an infinite background. Well, I like to call it the infinite background. I've heard other names, like in Mexico here they call it ciclorama, which is just like it's a round corner, right? What we want to do is we want to create a plane, like I just did right there, move this edge all the way up, and then either move these edges a couple of more times, like so, or even bevel them. Beveling them should work just fine. You can scale this and decide where you want the shadow to be. It's, again, this is mainly the function of this plane is mainly to make sure that it looks like there's no hard line on the shadows on the background of the character, and that way the character is the main focus of the whole thing. I'm gonna create a new camera, so I'm gonna go rendering, camera, panels, look to selected, and we're gonna find one very full body shot. We haven't really talked about camera shots in regards to characters because we haven't had a character until now. So in the next video, I'm gonna go very quickly about some of the different cameras that we can have. This one is called a full shot camera, and as the name implies, the character is gonna be like fully on the shot. That's pretty much it. Nothing else. Now for characters, and thanks to social media, one thing that you can actually do nowadays is change this to like a 1K composition. That way the character is the focus of the shot, and we don't have a lot of extra elements. And the next thing I want to do, and this is very important, is whenever you're doing character renders and you just want to show the character as the character, like you don't want to make, or you don't want to be telling any stories or anything, I strongly recommend you use Studio HDRIs, like this one's right here. I personally love this one. This is Brown Photo Studio. It was added relatively recently. This one's also quite nice. This Brown Photo Studio 01, which has like wooden floors. It's going to make the colors a little bit duller, of course. My advice still stands as for the lights, like try to go for things that are not super contrasty, like this shadows right here could be a little bit difficult to control later on. So let's this one. Let's use Brown Photo Studio 1. I'm gonna download this real quick for you guys. Again, this HDRI is gonna be available. Oh, it's taking a little bit longer than usual. That's weird. I'm not downloading anything else. So this is gonna be, as I mentioned, available for you guys in your source images folder, and you can download any other one that you might want from Polyhaven. Get this real quick here. There we go. Oh, we already had it. Cool. So here we're just gonna go Arnold Lights, or actually, let me save this real quick, and I'm gonna save this as a different scene so that you have the infinite plane. This is gonna be Acroc Finish or Portrait. Let's go with it. There we go. So I'm gonna go Arnold Lights, Skydome Light, and on the Skydome Light we're gonna load, of course, our very nice HDRI. So we go for the Brown Photo Studio. There we go, and that's it. Cool. Now again, we need to decide where we want the light to be coming from. In this case, I'm gonna go for the sort of like right side effect. And here's where the interesting bit's gonna happen. If you go to Arnold and you go to utilities, there's this texture manager, and here you can see all of the textures that we're using, quite a bit of for them, right? Like we have all of these UDIMs for the character, and then all of these elements right here. As I mentioned, it is a little bit heavy, so if your computer can't handle it due to memory space, you might want to try and change the resolution. I always try to provide the best possible resolution, but I do know that it might be complicated sometimes. So I'm gonna say Arnold Render, and we might get the little like texture file conversion. I'm actually also including the texture files, I think, for you, my friends. I don't remember if they were included or not, but if they are, that could like potentially make things a little bit easier. Let's take a look at the render here. Again, this is quite a heavy scene because we have a lot of elements, and that's also a little bit of the unfortunate side of renders. The more or the cooler you want your render to look, the more information and the more materials and stuff you're gonna have to add, right? And therefore, things are gonna get or become heavier and heavier. So yeah, this is it. It seems like the belt doesn't have the proper textures. It's looking a little bit weird. And of course, we're gonna go to camera shape 1. There we go. And that's it. So this is one of the most common mistakes that people make whenever they're doing a character render. They just throw in an HDRI and they're like, that's it, I'm good, I like how this looks, no need to do anything else. And unfortunately, even though, yeah, it looks quite cool and it looks interesting, it's not there. Like we really need to push the lights a little bit more to create a more interesting effect. So I'm going to show you guys one of the most basics and most common ways to illuminate or light a character to get a good result. This is what I like to call, or here in Mexico we call it la vieja confiable, the old trustworthy method, which is the famous 3-point light. So in a 3-point light setup, what we're going to have, as the name implies, is 3 lights, 3 main lights, and the first one is going to be our key light. So I'm going to go to my HDRI and I'm going to actually turn it off. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go Arnold Lights. We're going to create a new area light, and we need to decide how we want this light to be. I'm going to be following, you guys remember when we did the little fruit bowl back in the beginning and we talked about Rembrandt? Well, Rembrandt not only used this claro-oscuro technique quite a bit, he actually popularized a very famous lighting technique that it's used today, like it's been used for several hundred years, which is this Rembrandt Illumination. And the way this works is you're going to have a main point of light, just one point of light illuminating the character, and you're going to get this sort of like triangular shape underneath the eye that's on the shadows. Super common to find this sort of effect, this Rembrandt Triangle, on a lot of stuff. If you've ever taken a photography class, you probably heard about this one. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna create a light. It's gonna be kind of high over here. I want to change this to a disc, so it's more like a spotlight. And I'm gonna move this around so that we can see, so we can hit that little triangle that I'm expecting to hit. Now, one thing that I didn't mention, the character can be moved a little bit. So for instance, if I grab like this 3 joints right here, I can rotate him slightly. That's going to give me a little bit of a different effect, of course. It's going to give me a little bit of this contrapposto. It's not rigged, like not all of the pieces are rigged. So for instance, the skirt here, we might need to just like move it around and just like tweak it so that it's not overlapping, like the finger there. Just rotate a little bit. For instance, the head, we can move the head a little bit, just to make him look a little bit more alive, right? Like we don't want things to be like in a perfect T-pose. Now, of course, if that changed, we might need to go to the camera and find like a good effect. Actually, I kind of like that one. Like looking to the side, looks quite interesting, quite like menacing. So there we go. Now, if we go to this one, we're of course gonna use a higher exposure. This guy is in real world scale, so you might need to use bigger numbers. And if we take a render, as you can see, this is what we get. He has a really shiny skin. He's supposed to be this sort of like amphibian character, as you probably can tell from the colors and stuff. So yeah, this is the character. I really like the light right now, but I think we can increase this a little bit more. Let's try 19. I think that's gonna be a little bit too much. Let's start lowering it. There we go. Let's go for a little bit of contrast, not that much, something like that. I think, yeah, there we go. Maybe 17. 17 is gonna work. There we go. Now, as we've mentioned before, depending on how we want the shadows to be, we can go for really soft shadows or really hard shadows. I do think I want a softer shadows, so I'm gonna go for a bigger form, and that's immediately gonna give me a softer shadow because there's more area on the light, and we get this very, very cool effect. I'm actually gonna break one of the rules that we've been using so far. I'm not gonna use temperature right now. I want to show you the basics first, and then we're gonna tweak it up a little bit. So yeah, that looks good. Now we're going to go to the photo studio, and the photo studio is going to be the second light that we're going to be using. There's a little bit of overlap on the code. So let's rotate this a little bit more, or just like bring it forward. As you can see the little overlap right there on those specific areas. There we go. So yeah, as I was mentioning, we are going to be turning on our main element right here, our HDRI. The intensity is back on. And when we render, what's going to happen is now we're going to be combining two light sources. And it might not seem like it because the main light or the key light is actually coming from the same side as the other light. Am I not using GPU? Oh, I was not using GPU. There we go. Let's go render, or sorry, Arnold and render. Hopefully this doesn't break because it's against a lot of textures. There we go. So yeah, as you can see, we have two very cool lights coming, and you've seen these shots. You've seen these shots before, and the reason I'm super certain that you've seen this before is they do this all the time for photo shoots. So if you look for a Star Wars photo shoot, like magazine and stuff like that, they always do this sort of like characters on a white screen, just showing you how they are. I remember them seeing as a kid. I can't remember like exactly which magazine, but this kind of shots are really common in the industry, and they're really good because you can focus totally on the character. You can get to meet the character as a sort of way of appreciating what's going to be on the movie. So there we go. Now let's grab this one right here, and what I'm going to do, usually the field light, the main reason why we have a field light is because the field light will, as the name implies, fill the information or the areas of the character that are really dark. So if I render right now, on the other side, if I move this to the other side of the character, as you can see right here, the exposure of the window is going to pretty much get rid of those very nice shadows that we had on the character on this side. So in order to avoid that, we're definitely going to bring the exposure down because we do want to have a little bit of contrast, but not that much. There we go. So as you can see with a -2, we still get this very nice light information on the character, where we're no longer like overriding this whole thing. You can go even darker, of course, like if you go to like a -4, for instance, it's going to be like, again, like super dark shadows. But the main reason why we have this sort of like field light is to make sure that the shadows are not as dark. So I'm going to keep this at -2. There we go. That looks really good. And finally, the last light that we're going to be adding, and this is like the chef's kiss, is the little extra light that makes everything come together, is called the rim light. We've talked about this one before on the night scene. We're going to go Arnold Lights. We're going to do an area light, and we're going to position this area light like here to the side of the character. It's usually supposed to be placed on the opposite side of your key light. So if that's my key light, I should place it over here. It's going to be a little bit difficult to find like the perfect position. It usually has a really small shape, like the beams are really concentrated. So we're going to have a bigger or a smaller spread. And the reason why we use a rim light is because we want to separate the character from the background. So let's go to like a 10, 15, there we go. That's what we want. That very nice like illuminated bit on the character. That's what we're going for. I'm actually gonna move this thing like higher up, so we hit the shadows. And sometimes the intensity of the rim light is even bigger than the one from the main light, so that you get this really intense effects. It's literally like a spotlight. So we can play around with that. And I think I'm going to increase the spread a little bit. It's going to make this look better. And look at that. We get this very nice effect where we have our main light like showing the whole character. Then we have this rim light. And then we have all of the other lights. Now, one of the important things, as you can see right here, is we're kind of missing something there on the eye. Like, we're missing a little bit of a reflection, because otherwise that eye looks kind of dead. He doesn't have any like textured eyes or anything. So here's again where we can start breaking away from some of like the traditional ways to do things and go into the CG world and say, hey, you know what? I'm gonna add just a super small like circular light right here, and I'm just gonna make this like lighter. Let's do like 20. Of course, that's way too much. Let's bring it down. Let's go to like a 15. Or did I change the material? I'm wondering if I changed the material. No, the material's there. There we go. I mean, we can increase, for instance, on the material right now, it's set to metal. There we go. That was a problem. So let's get rid of the metal. So it's not metal, it's just going to be a reflective surface. There we go. But now you can see that thanks to this extra little light that we added here, it's not really affecting my composition, or at least it shouldn't be that much. And I can bring this even lower to like 12. But it's going to be on the eye. If I were to turn this off, I think we're going to lose a little bit of that effect. It's super subtle, but it's there. It's like a little extra like pixel right there that's helping us with the whole character. So yeah, that's pretty much it. There's one more thing that we can add for this, and this is also going to bring your character renders to the next level, and that's adding a little bit of a backdrop, kind of like framing the character. So for this, we're also going to be using an area light, where we're going to place this area light back here on the back of the character, hidden by the ropes or by whatever we have right here. Let's up this like this, and let's do like a 10. Let's lower the spread a little bit. Let's go for like a 15. There we go. See that? We can go even more extreme, like a 17. And it looks like he is like in front of a spotlight, as you can see right here. And it's another way to frame the character. You want to hide this as much as possible, or blink this as close to the possible as to the character, so we don't have this weird shadow right there. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but it could make things look a little bit weird. And that's it. That's pretty much it. With this, we have our very traditional 3-point light setup. So with this, guys, if you know how to use ZBrush, if you know how to model things, I hope that you never have to go back to just like taking a screenshot of your ZBrush viewport or just printing your screen directly from Maya. You now have the tools. Yes, it will take you about 15 minutes, 20 minutes to set it up, but as you can see, you're gonna get such a better render from this. And now, of course, on top of this, we can add our imagers, we can add our denoiser, and we can add our like camera effects, lens effects. In this case, I just want to add a little bit of vignette to, again, frame the character a little bit more. You can see that the denoiser doing its job there really nicely. Let's go to the options here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to render this at 2K square, so it's a little bit more than full HD. And if we go render now, we're going to have way more pixels. Oh, that's not it. Let's go camera shape 1. And there we go. And we have this very cool, clean look at our character. You're going to be doing a lot of those renders because not everyone wants to see a cinematic render where the character is hidden by shadows or there's like a lot of fog. Sometimes you want to show your character just as it is, just like this, like just straight into a super clean light, and that's it. We are going to be doing the cinematic shots. You've already seen those in the intro video, of course. But it's also very important that you guys understand how to do this sort of shots. So in the next couple of videos, we're going to explore, first of all, we're going to go into the camera positions, like the kind of framing that you're going to have, sort of like a visual guide of all of the different cameras that you might get when you're planning your shots. And then we're going to do a couple of more interesting light sources that we can have here on our character. So hang on tight, and I'll see you back on the next one. Bye-bye. Hey guys, welcome back to the next part of our series. Today we're going to talk about camera compositions. And as I mentioned in the last couple of videos, there's a couple of camera compositions that are known as like industry standards, and it's very important that if you're going to be working in a production environment, you know about these shots. Now, I am going to be rendering some of them so that you can see the difference, but it's actually a really short lecture. I'm going to go to my camera, panels, look through selected, and right now we're going to start with one thing that we call the wide shot. Okay, so the wide shot or the ultra wide shot, it's usually used as a establishing shot. So when you want to tell the audience where we are, we're going to be using these very big open shots where we're going to see all of the elements. Usually in these long shots or wide shots, we're going to be using wide camera lenses. So we're going to be at like a 24, 18, stuff like that, so that we can see as much as possible. And then we start pushing in, right? We start pushing in towards our character, and we're going to get probably the most common and most well-known shot, which is the full shot. And the full shot, as the name implies, is just the character being completely seen by our camera, and we get to see this sort of stuff. You can have 2 people on a full shot, you can have 3 people on a full shot, and again, the full shot is usually described as the type of shot where you're going to be seeing the full character. From here, we're going to jump to a shot that's actually very curious, and they do use quite a bit in Star Wars, which is the famous cowboy shot. And it's known, or it's referred as the cowboy shot, because we're going to cut the character at roughly a little bit above the knee, so that we can see whatever he's holding on his belt. So in the case of a Jedi, that will be, of course, the lightsaber. So this is what we would commonly see as a cowboy shot. And cowboy shots are really, really good. If you're doing a character or a creature, usually the legs or the lower part of the body is not as interesting as the top part. So it's really cool to have this sort of like a kind of like a profile picture, right, for your character, where you're gonna see the top part of the creature. This is what I would normally do for my characters as well. Like I would do definitely a full shot, but if I want to talk about like or if I want to appreciate the details a little bit more, I would definitely go into this sort of close shot like this, which is called not a close shot, it's called the cowboy shot. After this, we have the mid shot, which is just cutting the character at like literally at half, so something like this. And as you can see, we can appreciate more of the actual gesture of the character. So if he is angry, or if he's sad, or if he is happy, this is where we're going to be seeing most of the movies nowadays. Whenever you're seeing like a shot, like a normal shot, like someone talking to another person, you're gonna see this sort of stuff where it's a close up. Well, it's not really a close up. It's like a medium shot where you see half of the character. Then we go further in and we go into the famous close up, which is something like this. Now, thankfully, our camera or our character right now, he has 4K texture, so he can hold, we can see quite a bit of detail even at this distance, which is quite nice. But if you don't have this much detail on your characters, you would definitely try to avoid having this sort of shots, because then you're going to start seeing like the fragmentation of a decimated character, or maybe there's like a weird topology and stuff like that, and that's of course not something that you want. One thing that you do need to keep in mind is once we start getting into this specific distance, once we start seeing the characters like really close, like what we're seeing right here, you definitely want to change the focal length to something a little bit flatter, because even though we're at 35, which is considered to be like a standard focal length, it will still distort your characters and it will make them look a little bit weird. So once you go into like the portrait mode, like this sort of stuff, you definitely want to go for something like a 55. I really like using 55s. You're definitely going to have to push out to reframe your character. But 55s, and I've seen some people go all the way up to 90 on the focal length, are really good for portraits because they won't distort your character as much. You will see things in a not orthographic way, but really flat. I personally don't like the 90s because they're quite a bit flat for my taste, but I like 55. 55 I think works pretty nice, and we can get a really nice close-up here for our character, and we're gonna get a nice effect. And finally, on this sort of like shots, we have something called a super close-up or extreme close-up, which is where you're going to be focusing like a specific part of the character, maybe the scar, right? Like if you think about like Harry Potter, when they're like, oh yeah, your scar, and then you have like this super zoom-in version of the scar. Well, that will be your extreme close-up, or your like super intense zoom on the character. I would also avoid using low focal length lenses at that point. I would recommend keeping flat lenses like this 55 or like a 90, but that's of course up to you depending on what the project calls for. Those are like the normal shots that you're gonna have for your character. So whenever you are communicating with a client, whenever you're in a project and someone tells you, hey, I need a render of this character, always ask them, what kind of render? A full shot, medium shot, cowboy shot? Do we want a close-up? Do you want a specific part of the character? Like, always ask for those kind of directions, because it's quite annoying when you send something to the client and they're like, oh no, that's not what I meant. Well, you didn't ask, right? So it's a little bit difficult. Remember that at the end of the day, in production, the communication is key. So make sure you always ask for the specific shot that they're going for. Now when we go back to the full shots, there's a couple of things that the camera can do that are also important for presentation purposes. So for instance, right now, again, as I've mentioned, this is a full shot, and it's a really nice, I would say, balanced, closed full shot. However, there's two things that we can do here. We can orient or rotate the camera so that we stay in the same position where we're seeing him from above, or we can bring the camera down. And it's usually referred to as tilt, so tilt up or tilt down. Those are usually the camera like movements that you're gonna find. So a tilt down will be something like this, where you're gonna be seeing the character from beneath, like a more of a hero shot. These are really, really cool because it makes you as the audience look small, like a kid or like a little soldier or something, and it makes the characters look more important, more menacing. Even if you're going for like the villain, you want to bring this sort of like importance to the thing. You can play around with the angles here on the camera. One thing that you can definitely do here is bring the focal length down. So if you bring the focal length down and keep the camera low like this, then what's going to happen is the character is going to look like super epic, right? So playing around with both the focal length and the position of the camera are important to generate this sort of effects. I think that's a little bit too much. Now, if we go the other way around, I'm going to go back to like a 55, if we go the other way around, if we tilt the camera up, now we're going to be seeing the character from the top, and that usually gives you as the audience a sense of superiority, or that you are more important, bigger or something than the character. In this case, it doesn't seem like much because the character is actually looking down, so he doesn't care that we're bigger. But if we were to go to the neck, for instance, this is going to break the rig, and he's looking towards us like this. Now it looks like we are better than them, right? Like in some sense, like we have the high ground, got that? Or we're just like looking at him from a balcony or something. Again, it's the position of the camera, like where are we actually looking the character from? And that's going to give us a different sort of impression. We then have something called, again, the extremes, right? Like that was tilt down or tilt up, and again, it's going to give us an interesting effect right there. If we go really down like this, I've seen this thing called like an ant's view, or like a floor perspective. There might be reasons why you might want this sort of composition. If you want to see like something important that he's holding, or if there's like, I don't know, like there might be some justification on why you might want to have like a super low like a view of your character. But the one that I've seen more often is something like this, which is called a bird's eye view. And that's when you go really high, and it's like if you were a bird and you take a look at the character, and maybe they're about to battle someone else, and you see them as a field, like kind of like a helicopter, right? Those are the most common shots that you're gonna find. Of course, there's other things such as camera movements and things like that, like that one we saw with Hitchcock, that are going to give more visual interest to the whole composition and to the whole presentation of your pieces. But as long as you know how to play around with how close you want to be to your character and how you want to frame the character, you're going to be able to create some really cool and amazing compositions. We're going to now talk on the next video about some more interesting light scenarios. So I want to go for like a mid shot right here. I think something like this is going to be cool. Oh, that looks really cool. We're not letting the audience see everything. There's a little bit of a hint from the lightsaber right there, but we're not letting the audience see everything. And then, of course, what I'm going to do here is I probably want to like rotate his face a little bit. I know that his neck is breaking. Let's not do that then. Let's bring the face down a little bit. I do want to kind of I want him to be facing like slightly to the side like this. Now we can fix that on the rig as well. I'm not sure that's I don't think that's great. So let's bring this back, or let's just rotate the camera and again find the composition. Usually this is another like interesting like bit of information. Usually the characters tend to face towards the right. Again, there's this sort of like psychological reason why we like place the shots in certain ways, and usually psychologically we associate the right of the image to moving forward or looking forward, and the left of the image we associated with looking backwards or going backwards. So usually the character is going to be looking towards the right. Usually, not always. You can of course have any sort of composition that you want. Just keep in mind that that's in general rules, that's what people think or see when they see this sort of compositions. So yeah, this is it. This is the composition that I'm going to keep. Again, it's kind of like a cowboy shot. I think I'm going to go a little bit more for that sort of like cowboy shot. And another thing I'm going to do here is in regards to the focal length, because that's important. I'm gonna go to a 55 to keep things a little bit flatter. That means that I'm of course gonna have to move the camera a little bit. Let's stop this. Let me move this around. There we go. And when you see this thing right here, we haven't really talked about like the way to frame things, but there's three main things you can do. You can keep a symmetrical composition, like what I have right here. You can move this thing to one of the sides like this, kind of like a rule of thirds, so keeping him on one of the thirds. And then we have this thing called the golden ratio, which is this is spiral. You've probably seen it before. You don't have to follow those things like per the rules. Like you can always break things and move things around. But one of the things that you definitely want to avoid is having a lot of empty space around the character. So in this case, for instance, if I were to render, there's way too much empty space here. So either I move the character or I push the camera in a little bit more so that we don't have as much empty space on this area. We are keeping this sort of like a rule of thirds, so he's on one of the thirds of the scene, but we don't want to like overdo it. Maybe even like a little bit more centered, but now we're losing the sort of like cowboy shot that we had. So since he's very symmetrical, something like this. There we go. So he's not perfectly in the center of the frame. Like most of his mass, as you can see, is towards the left. And that's going to give us a really cool composition. So I'm going to save this real quick. I'm going to stop the video right here, guys. And in the next one, again, we're going to talk about very dramatic light setups that we can do. These are setups that are usually used in photography, in theater as well. But we can definitely use them for renders to create something really interesting. So hang on tight, and I'll see you back on the next one. Bye-bye.